Hello, this is Mark and this is part 2 of my UCC history. The first part of this video dealt with 1302 to 1776, and you really should look at it because I'll make several references back and forth. And what can I say? It's a good first part. It can't all be done in one video. And now the second part is from 1776 to today. And again, the facts that I'm presenting are accurate. The dates are somewhat close. Again, but the connecting of the dots is unique. Okay, I can't find people writing this in history, but then that's some things a prophet is supposed to do. Now, basically in 1776, to back up, Adam Weishaupt formed a UCC rubric of serving the creation, and it was evil in intent, and basically the escalation of the onslaught of the European slaughter was justified through this philosophy. Okay, now that's all there is to it. Okay, it was definitely an escalation and made things worse. And for that, I'll give a brief explanation of why. Okay, now in John's Gospel 8, it says there that when Jesus looked at the Pharisees and the Sadducees, which are the lawyers of today, okay, the equivalent of lawyers and priests of today, and he said to them rip-roaring insults, saying they were not of God. Okay, and he told them that they'd kill him for this. Now the reality is Abraham's trust was they were of God because they would swore to serve the Creator. Okay, or serve God, and in this way he was righteous. He had a contract with God, and he served the creation, the Creator. Okay, now and that means he was of God. Now he was talking to them and saying they were not of God. Now the reality is Sadducees and Pharisees and lawyers today, because that's the foundation of the law society, are Pharisees and Sadducees, and that's from Nineveh, and they swore to God. Okay, now swearing to God means they're not of God. That's all there is to it. Okay, you might be for God, but you're not of God. Swearing to serve God, now that's being of God. But swearing to God is being, I'm repeating myself. Now, the reality is if they swear by serving the creation, they are with Satan. Okay, period. It's not a hard concept. Literally the mindset of authority today is perverted after close to 300 years to a satanic mindset that is totally perverted. And basically, they are with Satan. I know that's insulting. And, what can I say? They killed Jesus over insults this big. Okay. Now, the reality is history, the second commandment is what these guys were playing out. And there it says the third and fourth generation, the sins of the father will be held against the third and fourth generations. Well, the sins of the father of Albert Pike and the likes of John Locke was from 1860 to 1900s. And there were three truly impressive, actually 4 or 5, truly impressive characters that came up at that time. One being Albert Pike, who openly called himself Lucifer. He wrote the Order of the Scottish Rite, the Dogma of the Order of the Scottish Rite, which is purely demonic. He was the highest-ranking Mason in the United States for 40 years. He started the KKK. He was truly evil. His statue is in Washington Square. He's on a horse, and that's a very high, his bronze statue of him on a horse is Washington Square. The man had a severe impact on American history. He made Masons the rulers of the United States. Okay, it's through his efforts that this happened. Okay, now in England there was a guy who was called Albert Dicey, and 120 years prior to that, at the same time as England, as the United States forming, was Ireland joined England, and 120 years later, the churches and the government instilled in this idea that to the Irish that they wanted to separate because they were being treated so poorly. Okay, and that was intentional. The treating of so the Ireland made a movement to separate from England. Okay, and this was all orchestrated history because they were doing the sins of the father, experimenting with trying to return Jesus Christ through the Irish, because they were a people to the north, they had a queen to the south who had no understanding, and they rammed it through what's called the Dicey Doctrine. The Dicey Doctrine is the foundation of the parochial school program, which devastated Canada. Okay, the Canadian natives, and what can I say? Kevin Annett is doing a great job exposing that. And now, the other thing that he did was carbon taxes. Okay, carbon taxes were done in the 1890s, and that was for coal. And if you were found with contraband coal in your house, in order to keep your house warm, because no one had enough coal to keep their house warm by following the stringent programs insisted by England on Ireland through Albert Dicey, okay, who actually physically himself imposed this on Ireland. And half of Ireland either left or died. And carbon taxes were really wicked. If they saw that you had too much cash of coal, it means you were stealing from the government, going out on the crown's land and stealing her coal. Or you got to. So the punishment was they cut off your left hand on the spot, and that was, and then they cauterize it by putting it in the coals of your own fire. This was cruel. Okay, now that's carbon taxes, and carbon taxes today. If you think they are pretty and have a just means, then you're lost in the bullshit of what's going down. Now, those, and the other person there was Sir John Salmond, or Solomon, from the Solomon Islands, who definitely created a the personhood to corporations. And 120 years later, these corporations, these dead things, are greater than Solomon's wealth, and it's all fraud. Okay, corporations are dead things that rule the world, and that's a fundamental cornerstone of what I'm doing. But I spent a long time on that on the last video. Let's move into 120 years later, because again, this crew of people were doing it in 120 year spouts of the third and fourth generation. And 120 years later, you end up into today. Okay? And, we've been, for authority to say that there's no conspiracy by authority to do is insane. Okay? What can I say? Now, the reality is in Romans 7, there was a passage there to destroy the Lord's Day Act, okay? Because then they would be possessed by the spirit of death. And the Lord's Day Act was destroyed all over the Commonwealth Empire and England and the United States, and it's the commandment that was there to liberate us, which is a Romans 7 thing. And in Canada, That was done under the Lord's Day Act in a rule. And on this last today's history, I'll use Canadian dates and actual things, but the same things happened throughout the Commonwealth. So basically, in 1985 or 80, somewhere in the late 70s, a Big M Drug Mart court challenge came, which was a pharmacy that sold everything on Sundays, and they challenged that stores had to be open on Sundays, and that was a monumental decision because a corporation was given the people operating the company weren't charged. The corporation was charged, and the corporations got the right Section 7 rights to life, liberty, and security and happiness under the charter. And that was a monumental thing, and it was the Lord's Day Act. And that was it was in the courts for 17, 20 years. Okay? And when they ruled in 1985, it was a critical year. And what happened there is, one, prior to that, they turned us into SIN numbers, where we all became pieces of paper and a number. And then that happened on January 1st, 1985. Then the Lord's Day Act came in, and that ruling said that we, the people of Canada, no longer wanted to be ruled under the England's interpretation and concept of God. Okay? We were a multicultural society. Therefore, we could go shopping on Sunday. Okay? Now, shortly thereafter, the Bank Act, the 1985 Bank Act, was introduced and driven down Canadians' throats. Okay? Now, the reason I say driven down the throats is because it never actually passed Parliament. It was so unconstitutional, it was pathetic. Okay? In there, we became warehouse receipts. Okay? Because if we were not promoting, if we, the people, no longer stood under England's concept of God, means that that England's concept of God is what backs money. And if we no longer stood under that, means that we had to become the backers of money. And we became chattel as backers of money under warehouse receipts using your SIN number, which was also done in 1985. And it was total perversion of the law. You became a warehouse receipt. And under the warehouse receipts, we are bags of carbon. Okay? Hydrocarbons to be specific. Okay? And remember, we are entering a whole new round of carbon taxes. And if you don't think that's where they're going to slaughter human beings because of carbon, our carbon emissions, then you're not reading well between the lines of what's being clearly pointed out, okay, in the rules and regulations being imposed by UCC and this abomination called NAFTA that has come up. Now, bottom line is the Lord's Day Act was done in order to make us slaves. Okay? We became paper bondage. Now, because bottom line is, we're ruled under de facto law. And you should go look at a video I did called Insanity Clause around Christmas time. Okay? Bottom line is, de facto law means we lost a war to somebody. And attorney generals are ordered to impose, in our case in Canada, the corporate takeover of Canada, which happened with NAFTA. Okay, seriously. Okay, NAFTA agreement. The Corporation of Canada was created with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and NAFTA was the fulfillment of a Galatians prophecy of 430 years after the establishment of a duly recognized covenant that recognized God, which was the Act of Supremacy of 1562. Okay? Now, which you have to go back to the other video to get. If you add 430 years, which is this Galatians 3 line, to the Act of Supremacy of Parliament of 1562, and you'll end up in 1992. And now there is something greater than Solomon, okay? Now the reality is we in Canada voted for, with the lowest majority ever possible, okay? It was rigged. What else can you say? Imagine that, an election that's rigged. But back then it was unique. What can you say? Or at least for Canada, maybe. Okay, no. NAFTA was passed in, and it shortly became the NAFTA agreement. Now, NAFTA stands North American Free Trade Agreement. And shortly thereafter, it became the North American Free Trade Agreement. Because in the first one, they allowed, in the 42 pages that were never published, they allowed themselves to call this. Now, the reality is the North American Free Trade Agreement is the Hudson's Bay Charter of 1538 or 1539. Okay? And under that, everyone, we are referred to, all of North America is referred to as Turtle Island. And under despotic rulings, under John A. Macdonald, who was an Order of the Scottish Rite, our founding Prime Minister, who did what's called the Riel decision, it enforced and put case law precedent that the natives weren't really human beings. They were lesser human beings. And now that with the imposition of NAFTA, everybody on the North American continent became lesser than human beings and were being managed by corporations. Our caretakers under this beautiful corporate system is taking care of us. Now, the reality is it's pathetic, okay? All of a sudden, everything that is freedom for us, or luxuries, or necessities that we call, things we thought were standard, we can't afford now because the economy can't afford it for us. Well, it's bullshit. Because they're trying to maximize the profit from we, the slaves. And they can't do this by giving us treats like a decent working wage. And it goes on and on and on. And it's because corporations are treating us like the raw material for their enlightened society, which is terrible. Now, bottom line is, all our freedom's been taken away. Now, in 1993, nothing that happened under NAFTA would have been possible. And they said, no, nothing's really going to happen with NAFTA. But, in 1990, which was true in 1992, but then in 1993, the oath to the bar in Canada changed. Okay? And they went back to the oath to the bar of King Henry VIII, of serving the sovereign's interest and being submissive to the crown. And that means that the Prime Minister and his attorneys generals are above the law. And lawyers can't do anything about it. Okay? I've written extensively on that. It's 126 of the Criminal Code of Canada. They didn't have to change a word of the law. But by changing the oath to the bar, lawyers prior to 1993, they could be respectful to the crown and argue with the judge and the attorney general in back rooms at a pretrial and win for his defendant. But under today's rules, at pretrial is determined whether you're guilty or not. And it comes down to an attorney general looking at the lawyer and saying, he's guilty, he has to be guilty, because the form says it has to happen this way. And they're driving down colonial rule. Okay? Colonial rule was meant to conquer other people, but there's no other people left. It's imploding on itself. which is a UCC thing of serving the sovereign's interest, which is diabolical in its beginning. Now, the reality is everybody knew it would cause itself to implode. And it's just pathetic. Okay, now, in Canada, this happened, they changed the oath and this happened. Now, at the 1993, they said there would be a problem with the oath of office here. So in 1998, the Police Act came in. Okay, and that's where the RCMP became part of the cabinet of Canada. And it's pure despotism. It's like taking the wolf and putting him in charge of the chicken's coop. Okay, under the Police Act, all oaths changed. Period. All the oaths changed to serve the corporation. Okay, and they must obey the rule of law. And the rule of law is not the rule of law of the Canadian Constitution. It's Respondent Superior, which says no one is above the law. Okay? Except the Attorney General and the King, who are imposing despotism all over again. And it's purely orchestrated. What can I say? We've become a corporate state in Canada. But it's different than the Americans, okay? In Canada, okay, there's the Corporation of Canada, there's the Corporation of there's of British Columbia, there's the Corporation of the City of Vancouver, there's Public Works. All of these are listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and they're there to take care of us and make a greater and greater profit every year. Which means they have to take away from us who they're serving, which is the exact opposite of anything called democracy. Okay, it's pathetic. Now, the reality is in Canada, we the people are listed as on the Chicago Stock Exchange. We're cattle being used as chattel to feed the economy. In Canadian law, there's the Dictionary of Canadian Law, and if you look up the color of office, it says, by the people. It used to mean by the people, for the people, for 3,000 years. And in 1992, that changed to by the people, for the economy, under duress of a bad contract called the NAFTA Agreement. And it gives the case law precedences there. It's pathetic. The truth is going to set them free, is how they believe. They are being despots, rubbing it in our face ever since. Okay? And the reality is we come today to the One People's Public Trust, which is the fulfillment of Luke 11:30, 31, 32. Where the Queen of the South, she's a trustee, will rise with the men of this generation and condemn this generation. And that has all the markings. And under her, she's saying that we have to return to the public trust of serving the Creator, which is the exact opposite of Adam Weishoff's serving the creation. And I refuse to believe that Adam Weishaupt didn't do a snow job on them at the time, saying that serving the creation's solution is returning to serving the Creator. And it was an attempt to get around the sovereign's interest. And the sovereign's interest became a banking term. And under banking terms, that's the money's interest. Okay, and in today, all the income taxes and all of the money it generated can't pay the interest on the debt that every country has arisen. It's absurd. It's insanity. It's actually legal insanity. And automatonism rules society. And basically the solution of the UCC, to start, go into a room just like you did in 1993 or so and change the oath to serving the Creator, and paradise on earth will be triggered. Evil will scatter, just like Luke 11:10 or 15:17 says. And paradise on earth will experience itself because all debt in the world will be forgotten. All mortgages on every house, every car, every loan, every municipal loan, every school board loan, all of these loans are going to be paid with the stroke of a pen, because technically that money isn't even printed. It's a giant debt. It can never be printed with printed money because the banksters rule the show. It's the triggering mechanism to paradise on earth. When all debt in the world is forgotten, the only remaining debt in the world will be the eternal debt of love for your neighbor. That's a Romans 13 promise. It's also an Isaiah 40 promise. And that's what's being offered. It will create a form of currency that will never rot. Period. And all debt in the world will be paid. A smooth transition into paradise on earth is not only possible, but it's a promise. And it's contained in one people's public trust, and oath holders are being called to surrender to love and the message of righteousness that will set everyone in the world free. And we all shine on like the moon, the stars, and the sun. Thank you very much.